The Atlantic slave trade stands as an unparalleled catastrophe in human history. It represents the largest forced migration ever recorded, fundamentally reshaping continents and cultures. Its scale and brutality defy easy comprehension, leaving an indelible mark on the global consciousness. Spanning from the 15th to the 19th centuries, roughly from the 1400s to the 1800s, this system of human bondage endured for over 400 years. It was a period defined by the systematic dehumanization and exploitation of millions. This vast timeline underscores its deep roots and pervasive influence. Over 12 million Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic Ocean during this period. This staggering number represents not just statistics, but countless individual lives, families, and communities shattered by an insatiable demand for labor. Their stories are central to understanding this era. This trade stands as a stark testament to human cruelty and the enduring spirit of those who suffered. It reveals the darkest capacities of humanity while simultaneously highlighting the resilience and resistance of the enslaved. The legacy of this struggle continues to resonate. The foundation of the modern world, particularly its economic structures and racial hierarchies, was built upon the suffering and sale of human beings. This uncomfortable truth demands our attention and critical examination. Acknowledging this past is crucial for understanding our present. The origins of the Atlantic slave trade are deeply rooted in European greed and an insatiable demand for resources. The burgeoning economies of Europe craved commodities like sugar, tobacco, and cotton, driving a relentless search for cheap labor. This economic imperative became a primary catalyst. West Africa, prior to extensive European intervention, comprised thriving kingdoms rich in trade, art, and scholarship. Empires like Benin, Mali, and Songhai boasted sophisticated political systems and vibrant cultural traditions. These societies were not primitive, but complex and established. Portuguese exploration in the mid-15th century marked a pivotal turning point. Initially, Portuguese mariners sought gold and other valuable commodities along the West African coast in the 1440s. Their early interactions were primarily commercial exchanges. However, they soon discovered that enslaved Africans could be a far more lucrative commodity. This realization shifted their focus from trade goods to human beings, fundamentally altering the trajectory of their engagement with Africa. The economic calculus was brutally clear. The Portuguese established sugar plantations on Atlantic islands like Madeira and São Tomé, pioneering the use of enslaved African labor. These early plantations served as a brutal blueprint for the massive agricultural enterprises that would later emerge in the Americas. This model proved tragically effective. The post-Columbus Americas presented a new, devastating context for the trade. Indigenous populations were decimated by European diseases and brutal conquest, creating a severe labor shortage. The existing workforce was simply insufficient for colonial ambitions. The growing demand for labor on vast plantations in the New World, cultivating crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton, became overwhelming. European colonizers needed a robust, exploitable workforce to fuel their burgeoning agricultural economies. This need was paramount. Consequently, Europeans turned to Africa for human labor on an unimaginable scale. The existing infrastructure of the Portuguese trade, combined with the desperate need for workers, rapidly expanded the transatlantic slave system. This decision had catastrophic global consequences. The Atlantic slave trade operated within a complex and brutal economic framework often termed the gruesome triangle of trade. This system connected three continents in a cycle of exploitation and profit. Its efficiency was matched only by its inhumanity. Manufactured goods, such as textiles, firearms, and alcohol, were transported from Europe to Africa. These goods were exchanged for enslaved people, forming the first leg of the triangular journey. This exchange fueled the capture and sale of human beings. Enslaved Africans were then forcibly transported across the Atlantic to the Americas, enduring the horrific Middle Passage. This leg of the journey was designed for maximum human cargo, with no regard for life or dignity. It was a journey of profound suffering. Finally, raw materials like sugar, rum, cotton, and tobacco, produced by enslaved labor, were shipped from the Americas back to Europe. This completed the triangle, enriching European powers and fueling their industrial expansion. The entire system was predicated on exploitation. The capture and branding of Africans marked the beginning of their ordeal. Raids by European traders or African intermediaries tore individuals from their homes and communities. Branding with hot irons served to mark them as property, stripping them of their identity. The harrowing Middle Passage was a journey of unimaginable suffering and death. Enslaved people were packed into cramped, unsanitary conditions below decks, often chained together. They were barely able to move, breathe, or maintain basic hygiene. High mortality rates plagued these voyages, primarily from disease such as dysentery and smallpox, starvation, and sheer despair. The conditions were breeding grounds for illness, and many simply succumbed to the psychological and physical torment. The ships became floating tombs. Sharks frequently trailed the slave ships, feeding on the bodies of those who died and were thrown overboard. This grim reality underscores the horrific nature of the journey and the callous disregard for human life. The ocean itself bore witness to the atrocities. It is estimated that between 1.5 and 2 million lives were lost during the Middle Passage alone. This staggering figure represents a massive demographic catastrophe, a testament to the brutality of the system. Each death was a profound loss. The Middle Passage was a living hell that broke the hearts of stone, as contemporary accounts attest. It was a deliberate process of dehumanization, designed to strip individuals of their will and identity before they even reached the Americas. Its psychological impact was immense. Upon arrival in the Americas, the survivors of the Middle Passage faced immediate and further dehumanization. They were branded once more and then sold at auction, often after being fattened up to appear healthier. Families were routinely torn apart during these sales. Their lives became an unrelenting cycle of toil and brutal treatment under the system of chattel slavery. From dawn till dusk, under the watchful eyes of overseers, they were forced to labor in fields and homes. The work was back-breaking and endless. The production of luxuries like sugar, coffee, tobacco, and cotton paid for in blood fueled the economies of European empires. These commodities, highly prized in Europe, were cultivated through the extreme exploitation of enslaved African labor. The profits were immense. Despite the overwhelming oppression, resistance flourished in myriad forms. Enslaved people actively rebelled against their captors and frequently attempted to escape the plantations. These acts of defiance, though often met with severe punishment, were constant. Many successfully formed maroon communities in remote, inaccessible areas, preserving their cultures and traditions. These independent settlements, often in mountains or swamps, became beacons of freedom and self-determination. They were living testaments to resilience. The preservation of songs, languages, and faiths became vital acts of cultural resistance. Despite efforts to strip them of their heritage, enslaved Africans maintained and adapted their traditions. These cultural expressions provided solace and identity. The Haitian Revolution, spanning from 1791 to 1804, stands as the most successful slave revolt in history. The enslaved population of Saint-Domingue rose in a massive, coordinated rebellion against their French oppressors. Their courage was extraordinary. They not only overthrew the brutal colonial regime but also defeated the formidable forces of Napoleon Bonaparte. This unprecedented victory sent shockwaves across the globe, inspiring hope among the enslaved and fear among slaveholders. It was a truly revolutionary act. Haiti established itself as the first free black republic, a monumental achievement that defied all expectations. Its independence demonstrated the power of collective resistance and the possibility of self-liberation. The Haitian Revolution remains a powerful symbol. As the horrors of the trade became more widely known, abolitionist movements gained significant momentum. Figures like Olaudah Equiano, a formerly enslaved man, and William Wilberforce, a British politician, championed the cause. Their tireless efforts brought the issue to the forefront. The legal abolition of the slave trade began to take hold in the early 19th century. Britain, a major maritime power, outlawed the transatlantic slave trade in 1807. This was a significant step, though it did not immediately end slavery itself. The United States followed suit, outlawing the importation of enslaved people in 1808. While this curtailed the legal transatlantic trade, it did not abolish domestic slavery, which continued to thrive and expand within the nation's borders. The internal trade persisted. Despite these legal prohibitions, illegal trafficking of enslaved people continued for decades. The immense profits to be made ensured that unscrupulous traders would find ways to circumvent the law. The demand for labor remained high in many regions. The Amistad Revolt in 1839 exemplifies this continued illegal trade. Africans who had been illegally enslaved seized control of the ship carrying them to Cuba. Their courageous act brought international attention to the ongoing illicit trade. These Africans were later declared free by the U.S. Supreme Court, a landmark decision that affirmed their humanity and right to freedom. The case highlighted the moral and legal complexities surrounding the illegal trade. It was a rare victory. The Clotilda, which arrived in Alabama in 1860, represents the last recorded slave ship to reach the United States. Its clandestine voyage, decades after the trade was outlawed, underscores the enduring nature of the illicit traffic. The ship's wreck was discovered in 2019. The persistence of illegal trafficking demonstrates the deep-seated economic incentives and racial ideologies that underpinned the slave system. Even after legal abolition, the demand for enslaved labor and the belief in racial superiority continued to drive exploitation. The fight for true freedom was far from over. The Atlantic slave trade profoundly shaped global economies and fueled the rise of modern capitalism. The immense wealth generated from enslaved labor provided capital for industrialization and expansion in Europe and the Americas. This economic foundation is undeniable. It was instrumental in building empires and fueling the unprecedented rise of European wealth and power. The resources extracted and the labor exploited directly contributed to the geopolitical dominance of European nations. Their prosperity was built on this system. Crucially, the trade fueled and solidified racial ideologies that persist today. The systematic dehumanization of Africans was justified by pseudoscientific theories of racial inferiority. These harmful beliefs continue to impact societies globally. The legacy of slavery left deep scars on societies and social structures, particularly in the Americas and Africa. It created enduring hierarchies and divisions that continue to manifest in systemic inequalities. The damage was pervasive and long-lasting. The trauma of the Atlantic slave trade reverberates through generations, perpetuating inequalities in wealth, health, and opportunity. The historical injustices continue to affect the descendants of both the enslaved and the enslavers. This intergenerational impact is profound. Indeed, many historians argue that the Atlantic slave trade served as a foundational pillar of modern capitalism. Its role in accumulating capital, establishing global trade networks, and creating a disciplined labor force cannot be overstated. It was a brutal engine of economic development. Understanding this legacy is not merely an academic exercise, it is essential for comprehending contemporary global disparities. The historical roots of racial injustice and economic inequality are inextricably linked to this period. We must confront these truths. The enduring impact demands ongoing critical analysis and a commitment to addressing the systemic issues that stem from this historical trauma. The past is not merely past, it actively shapes our present realities. Its shadow is long. Despite the unimaginable brutality, the story of the Atlantic slave trade is also one of profound resilience, survival, and cultural transformation. Enslaved Africans and their descendants refused to be utterly broken. Their spirit endured. Against all odds, the descendants of the enslaved reshaped the world in countless ways. They built new communities, forged new identities, and contributed immeasurably to the cultural fabric of the Americas. Their contributions are foundational. This resilience led to the creation of vibrant art forms, music, and spiritual practices that are now globally recognized. From the spirituals of the American South to the rhythms of the Caribbean, these expressions emerged from suffering and hope. Gospel, jazz, samba, and blues are just a few examples of musical genres born from the African diaspora. These forms are not merely entertainment, they are profound cultural statements, carrying histories of pain, joy, and resistance. they are living legacies. Through these artistic and spiritual practices, global culture has been immeasurably enriched by African rhythms, narratives, and identity. The forced migration, while devastating, inadvertently led to a powerful cultural fusion. This cultural legacy is a testament to human creativity. The ability to maintain and adapt cultural traditions under extreme duress speaks volumes about the strength of African heritage. It demonstrates a powerful human capacity to find meaning and express identity even in the face of systematic oppression. This cultural survival is a triumph. These cultural contributions are not merely footnotes in history, they are central to the development of modern global culture. They remind us that even in the darkest chapters, the human spirit finds ways to create, to connect, and to endure. Their influence is pervasive. The Atlantic slave trade serves as a crucial reminder of the dark underpinnings of the modern world. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that much of our present prosperity and global order has roots in profound injustice. This historical reckoning is essential. It underscores the importance of confronting uncomfortable historical truths, however painful they may be. Ignoring or sanitizing this history prevents a full understanding of our present challenges and perpetuates harmful narratives. Honesty is paramount. This history demands that we remember the victims, the millions whose lives were stolen and whose humanity was denied. Their stories, their suffering, and their resistance must be acknowledged and honored. We must never forget their sacrifice. It also calls upon us to acknowledge the lasting injustice and systemic inequalities that continue to plague societies today. The echoes of slavery are still heard in racial disparities and economic marginalization. The work of justice is ongoing. Ultimately, understanding the Atlantic slave trade is a call to strive for a more equitable and just future. By learning from this catastrophic past, we can better understand the mechanisms of oppression and work to dismantle them. This knowledge empowers us. The ocean remembers the countless souls lost during the Middle Passage, their stories carried by the currents. And so, too, should humanity remember this defining chapter of its history. To forget is to risk repeating its gravest errors.